Maya Rodriguez adjusted her stethoscope around her neck as she walked through the gleaming marble lobby of Blackstone Industries headquarters. The towering glass building seemed out of place for a hospital visit, but here she was, responding to an emergency call for their executive health center. Her worn sneakers squeaked slightly against the polished floor, drawing disapproving glances from the perfectly dressed employees hurrying past with their designer briefcases and confident strides. She had been working double shifts at Metropolitan General Hospital for the past 3 weeks, covering for colleagues who had fallen ill during the latest flu outbreak. Dark circles shadowed her brown eyes, and her scrubs, though clean, showed the wear of countless wash cycles. Maya didn't belong in this world of corporate luxury, and she knew it. But, when Dr. Harrison from the Executive Medical Center called requesting immediate assistance for a high-priority patient, she couldn't refuse the overtime pay. Her younger brother's college tuition wasn't going to pay itself. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt endless. Maya studied her reflection in the polished steel doors, tucking a strand of black hair behind her ear. She had tied her hair back in a simple ponytail, practical for work but hardly sophisticated. Her appearance was the least of her concerns, though. She was here to do a job, to help someone who needed medical attention. That's what mattered. The Executive Medical Center occupied an entire floor, complete with state-of-the-art equipment that made her hospital's aging machines look ancient. Dr. Harrison, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive suit, greeted her at the reception desk. His smile seemed forced, and Maya could sense his discomfort at having to call in outside help. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Ms. Rodriguez," he said, checking his gold watch. "Our regular nursing staff is attending a conference in Chicago, and we have a situation that requires immediate attention." Maya nodded, following him down a hallway lined with modern artwork and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city below. "What's the patient's condition?" "Stress-related symptoms, elevated blood pressure, possible anxiety attack, Dr. Harrison replied curtly. "The patient is demanding. He's not accustomed to feeling vulnerable, and he's been quite difficult with the medical staff." They stopped outside a door marked Executive Suite A. Dr. Harrison's expression grew more serious. "I should mention, this is Alexander Blackstone himself, the CEO. He built this company from nothing and he's not used to anyone telling him what to do. He's already dismissed 2 of our technicians this morning." Maya had heard of Alexander Blackstone, of course. Everyone in the city had. His face graced magazine covers and business journals regularly. He was known for his ruthless business tactics, his demanding personality, and his habit of acquiring struggling companies and either turning them around or dismantling them completely. At 38, he had built a business empire worth billions, but his reputation for being cold and calculating preceded him everywhere. "I understand," Maya said simply. "Let me see what I can do to help." Dr. Harrison knocked gently before opening the door. The suite beyond looked more like a luxury hotel room than a medical facility. Rich mahogany furniture, leather seating, and another wall of windows created an atmosphere of power and success. And there, pacing near the windows with his shirt unbuttoned and tie loosened, was Alexander Blackstone himself. He was taller than Maya had expected, with dark hair that looked disheveled despite its expensive cut. His jaw was clenched tight, and, even from across the room, she could see the tension in his broad shoulders. When he turned to face them, his steel-gray eyes held a mixture of frustration and something else Maya recognized immediately: fear. "I told you I don't need another nurse," Alexander snapped, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I need to get back to work. The board meeting is in 2 hours, and I have 3 conference calls scheduled before then." Dr. Harrison stepped forward nervously. "Mr. Blackstone, this is Maya Rodriguez. She's one of the most experienced nurses at Metropolitan General, and she's here to help monitor your condition until we can get your symptoms under control." Alexander's gaze swept over Maya dismissively, taking in her simple scrubs, her tired appearance, and her obvious discomfort in the luxurious surroundings. His expression hardened further. "No offense, but I need someone who understands the pressure I'm under. Someone who gets what it means to run a company of this size. Not He gestured vaguely in Maya's direction. This. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. Mr. Blackstone, I'm here to help with your medical needs, not to discuss business. Your blood pressure is elevated, and Dr. Harrison is concerned about your symptoms. Would you please allow me to take your vitals? My vitals are fine, Alexander shot back, running a hand through his hair. It's just stress. I've handled worse than this before. What I can't handle is having my time wasted by people who don't understand that millions of dollars are at stake every minute I'm away from my desk. Maya glanced at Dr. Harrison, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. She had dealt with difficult patients before, but Alexander Blackstone was on another level entirely. His dismissive attitude and obvious contempt for her presence stung, but she had a job to do. I understand you're under pressure, Maya said calmly, pulling a blood pressure cuff from her medical bag. But your health has to come first. You can't run a company if you collapse from exhaustion or have a heart attack. Alexander laughed, but there was no humor in it. Collapse? I've been working 18-hour days since I was 25. I've closed billion-dollar deals on 3 hours of sleep. I think I can handle a little stress without needing someone to hold my hand. His words were clearly meant to put her in her place, to make her feel small and insignificant in his world of high-stakes business and unlimited power. Maya had encountered this attitude before, usually from wealthy patients who viewed medical staff as servants rather than professionals. But something in Alexander's tone suggested his hostility was about more than just arrogance. Mr. Blackstone, Maya said quietly, would you mind if I spoke with you privately for a moment? Dr. Harrison looked surprised but nodded and stepped toward the door. I'll be right outside if you need anything. Once they were alone, Maya turned to face Alexander directly. He had stopped pacing and was now standing with his arms crossed, clearly waiting for her to either back down or make some futile attempt to assert authority she didn't have in his world. You're scared, Maya said simply. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Alexander's expression shifted from dismissive irritation to something much more dangerous, cold fury. Excuse me? His voice was low and threatening. You're scared, Maya repeated, setting down her medical bag and meeting his gaze steadily. I've seen it before. You're used to controlling everything around you, and suddenly, your own body is sending you signals you can't ignore or dismiss with money or authority. It's terrifying when the one thing you can't control is yourself. Alexander took a step closer, his presence suddenly intimidating in the confined space. You have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't build a billion-dollar company by being scared of anything. Maybe not, Maya acknowledged. But you're scared now. And that's okay. It's human. I am not scared, Alexander said through gritted teeth. I am frustrated that I'm being forced to waste time I don't have on medical theater when I should be handling a crisis that could cost my company millions. Maya studied his face carefully. Beneath the anger and arrogance, she could see the telltale signs she had learned to recognize during her years in emergency medicine. The slight tremor in his hands, the way he kept taking deeper breaths than necessary, the tension around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant pressure. What crisis? She asked quietly. Alexander paused, clearly not having expected the question. What? You mentioned a crisis that could cost your company millions. What's happening? For a moment, his guard seemed to slip. One of our subsidiary companies in Taiwan is facing a hostile takeover. If we lose them, it could trigger a cascade effect that would put 12,000 jobs at risk. I've been working for 3 weeks straight to prevent it, and now everyone wants me to sit here and play patient while Rome burns. Maya nodded slowly. That sounds incredibly stressful. When was the last time you slept more than 4 hours in a night? I don't see how that's relevant. When was the last time you ate a real meal? Not coffee and whatever you could grab between meetings? Alexander's jaw tightened. I don't have time for, when was the last time you took a day off? Maya interrupted gently. He fell silent, and Maya could see the exact moment when the question hit home. His shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly, and, for just a second, the mask of absolute control slipped completely. "I can't remember," he admitted quietly. Maya felt her heart clench with unexpected sympathy. She had seen this before, though never quite on this scale. High achievers who pushed themselves beyond all reasonable limits, who forgot that they were human beings with physical and emotional needs, who mistook exhaustion for dedication and burnout for success. "Mr. Blackstone," she said softly, "you're not having a heart attack, and you're probably not having a serious medical emergency. But your body is trying to tell you something important. It's trying to tell you that you're pushing too hard, for too long, without giving yourself the basic care you need to function." "I can't slow down," Alexander said, and, for the first time, his voice carried a note of genuine vulnerability. "Too many people depend on me. If I fail, if I show any weakness, everything could fall apart. And, if you collapse from exhaustion, what happens then?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city sprawling below them. Maya could see his reflection in the glass, and she was struck by how young he looked despite his reputation and success. The weight of responsibility he carried was written in every line of his face. "You think I'm weak," he said finally. "You think I can't handle the pressure." "No," Maya replied honestly. "I think you're human. And I think you've been pretending you're not for so long that you've forgotten what that means." Alexander turned to look at her again, and this time his expression was different. The hostility was still there, but it was tempered by something else, curiosity, perhaps, or confusion. As if he couldn't quite figure out why this nurse in wrinkled scrubs was speaking to him like an equal instead of treating him with the deference he was accustomed to. "You don't know anything about me," he said, but the words lacked their earlier venom. "I know you're exhausted," Maya said. "I know you're under enormous pressure. I know you've built something incredible, but you're so afraid of losing it that you're destroying yourself trying to hold on to it. And I know that right now, whether you want to admit it or not, you need help." Alexander stared at her for a long moment, and Maya could see the internal battle playing out across his features. Part of him wanted to dismiss her, to call security and have her removed from his sight. But another part of him, the part that had brought him to the medical center in the first place, recognized the truth in her words. "What do you suggest?" he asked finally, and Maya was surprised by how much the simple question cost him. "Let me take your vitals," she said. "Let Dr. Harrison run some basic tests. Give yourself an hour to make sure you're not actually having a medical emergency. And then, if everything checks out, we can talk about some strategies for managing stress that won't require you to abandon your responsibilities." Alexander considered this for a moment. "1 hour," he said finally. "1 hour," Maya agreed. As she began setting up her equipment, Maya couldn't help but notice that Alexander's hands were still trembling slightly. His blood pressure was indeed elevated, and his heart rate was faster than it should be for someone sitting still. But more concerning to her was the exhaustion she could see in every line of his body. "When did this start?" she asked as she wrapped the blood pressure cuff around his arm. "When did what start?" "The symptoms that brought you here today. The elevated blood pressure, the anxiety, whatever made you finally admit you needed medical attention." Alexander was quiet as Maya took his blood pressure. When the machine beeped with the results, both of them looked at the numbers displayed on the screen. 160/105, definitely elevated, but not immediately dangerous. 3 days ago," Alexander said quietly. "I was in a meeting with the board, discussing the Taiwan situation, and suddenly, I couldn't catch my breath. My chest felt tight, and, for a moment I thought." He trailed off. "You thought you were having a heart attack," Maya finished gently. "It passed after a few minutes," Alexander said defensively. "But it happened again yesterday, and again this morning. Dr. Harrison insisted I come in for an evaluation." Maya nodded, making notes on her tablet. "Have you experienced anything like this before?" "No. Never." Alexander paused. "My father had a heart attack when he was 42. He was under a lot of stress at work, pushing himself too hard. He survived, but it was a wake-up call for him." "And you're 38 now," Maya observed. Yes. Maya could see the fear he was trying so hard to hide. The fear that he was following in his father's footsteps, that his drive and ambition might cost him his health or even his life. It was a fear that made sense, and it explained why he had been so defensive and hostile when she arrived. Mr. Blackstone, Maya said carefully, based on what I'm seeing, you're not having a heart attack. But you are showing signs of severe stress and exhaustion. Your body is trying to get your attention, and it's going to keep escalating these symptoms until you listen. What does that mean, exactly? It means that if you don't make some changes, if you don't find ways to manage the stress and take care of yourself, these symptoms are going to get worse. And, eventually, they could lead to the kind of serious health problems you're worried about. Alexander ran his hands through his hair, disrupting its carefully styled appearance even further. I can't just stop working. You don't understand the kind of pressure I'm under. If I show any sign of weakness, if I let up for even a moment, there are dozens of people ready to step in and take what I've built. Maya finished taking his pulse and sat back in her chair. I'm not suggesting you stop working. I'm suggesting you work smarter, not harder. There are ways to manage stress that don't require you to abandon your responsibilities. Such as exercise, proper nutrition, adequate sleep, delegation, stress management techniques. Maya paused. When was the last time you exercised? Alexander looked at her as if she had suggested he take up interpretive dance. I don't have time for exercise. You don't have time not to exercise, Maya replied firmly. Physical activity is one of the most effective ways to manage stress and improve mental clarity. Even 30 minutes a day could make a significant difference in how you feel and how effectively you work. 30 minutes a day might not sound like much to you, but when you're dealing with multiple crisis situations and international time zones, every minute counts. Maya could hear the frustration creeping back into his voice, but she pressed on. Mr. Blackstone, can I ask you something? How effective do you think you are right now? How clear is your thinking when you're running on 3 hours of sleep and caffeine? Alexander fell silent, and Maya could see that her question had hit home. She had worked with enough high-stress professionals to know that exhaustion and chronic stress didn't just affect physical health, they significantly impaired cognitive function, decision-making ability, and emotional regulation. I function fine, Alexander said, but his tone lacked conviction. Do you? Maya challenged gently. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your body is rebelling against the way you've been treating it. And if your physical health is suffering, I guarantee your mental performance is suffering too. Alexander stood up abruptly and walked back to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Maya could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself like a man carrying a weight too heavy for any one person to bear. You have no idea what it's like, he said quietly, not turning around. To have 12,000 employees depending on you for their livelihoods. To have investors who've trusted you with billions of dollars. To know that every decision you make could affect thousands of families, hundreds of communities. Maya felt a pang of sympathy for him. She had misjudged him initially, assuming his hostility was simply arrogance and entitlement. But now she could see that beneath the exterior of wealth and power was a man carrying an enormous burden of responsibility. You're right, she said softly. I don't know what that's like. But I do know what it's like to have people depending on you. I work in an emergency room, Mr. Blackstone. Every day, I hold people's lives in my hands. I make decisions that determine whether someone goes home to their family or doesn't. I know the weight of responsibility. Alexander turned to look at her, and, for the first time, his expression held something like respect. It's different, he said, but his tone was less dismissive than before. Maybe, Maya acknowledged. But the principles are the same. If I don't take care of myself, if I let stress and exhaustion compromise my judgment, people get hurt. If you don't take care of yourself, if you let stress compromise your judgment, people lose their jobs, investors lose their money, and everything you've built starts to crumble. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. Maya could see him struggling with the concept that taking care of himself wasn't selfish or weak, but actually essential to his ability to take care of others. I've never thought of it that way, he admitted finally. Most people don't, Maya said. We're taught that self-sacrifice is noble, that working ourselves to exhaustion shows dedication. But there's a difference between dedication and self-destruction. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of the city below. Maya could see that Alexander was processing what she had said, weighing it against everything he had believed about success and responsibility. Dr. Harrison knocked gently on the door before entering. "How are we doing?" he asked, looking between Maya and Alexander with cautious optimism. "Better," Alexander said, and Maya was surprised by how much more relaxed he seemed. "Ms. Rodriguez has given me some things to think about." Dr. Harrison looked relieved. "Excellent. I'd like to run a few more tests, just to be thorough, and then we can discuss a treatment plan." As Dr. Harrison began setting up his equipment, Maya started packing her supplies. Her immediate job was done. Alexander's vitals were stable, and he seemed calmer than when she had arrived. But she found herself reluctant to leave. There was something about this powerful man who had forgotten how to take care of himself that tugged at her heart. "Ms. Rodriguez," Alexander said as she zipped up her medical bag. "Thank you for talking to me like a person instead of treating me like a headline." Maya looked up, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "That's what I do, Mr. Blackstone. I take care of people. All people." As she prepared to leave, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was far from over. Alexander Blackstone was a man who had everything money could buy, but he was missing the most basic elements of a healthy life. And, despite his wealth and power, despite the way he had dismissed her when she first arrived, Maya found herself caring about what happened to him. She had no way of knowing that this feeling was mutual, or that Alexander was watching her leave with something approaching regret. She had challenged him in ways no one had dared to in years, had spoken to him with a directness that cut through all pretense and protocol. In 30 minutes, this nurse in wrinkled scrubs had gotten him to admit things he had never acknowledged to himself. As the elevator doors closed behind Maya, Alexander realized he didn't even know her first name. But he found himself hoping that somehow, despite the vast differences in their worlds, this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. 2 weeks passed before Maya saw Alexander Blackstone again, and, when she did, the circumstances were drastically different. She was finishing her shift at Metropolitan General Hospital's emergency department when the ambulance sirens wailed outside. It was nearly midnight, and Maya was exhausted from a 14-hour day that had included 3 trauma cases and a difficult delivery that had required her to assist in surgery. The paramedics rushed through the automatic doors with their patient on a stretcher, shouting vital statistics and injury reports to the trauma team. Maya glanced over from where she was completing paperwork at the nurse's station, not particularly interested in another routine case. But something made her look closer at the figure on the stretcher, and her heart stopped. It was Alexander Blackstone, unconscious and covered in blood. "What happened?" Dr. Patricia Wong, the attending emergency physician, called out as the trauma team surrounded the stretcher. "Male, 38 years old, found unconscious in an alley behind his office building," the lead paramedic reported. "Appears to be the victim of an assault. Multiple contusions, possible concussion, defensive wounds on his hands and arms. Blood pressure low but stable, heart rate elevated." Maya abandoned her paperwork and followed the team into Trauma Bay 3. Alexander's usually perfectly groomed appearance was destroyed, his expensive suit was torn and bloody, his face was swollen and bruised, and there was a gash across his forehead that would definitely require stitches. "Does anyone know who this is?" Dr. Wong asked as she began her initial examination. "Alexander Blackstone," Maya said quietly. "CEO of Blackstone Industries. I treated him a couple of weeks ago for stress-related symptoms." Dr. Wong nodded grimly. "Well, he's got bigger problems than stress now. Let's get a CT scan of his head and a full-body X-ray. I want blood work, and someone needs to check those defensive wounds for embedded debris." As the trauma team worked efficiently around Alexander's unconscious form, Maya found herself studying his face. Even battered and bruised, she could see the exhaustion she had noticed before. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't been following her advice about getting adequate sleep. "Maya," Dr. Wong called out. "I need you to clean and assess those defensive wounds while we wait for the CT results." Maya nodded and moved closer to Alexander's side. As she gently cleaned the cuts and scrapes on his hands and forearms, she couldn't help but notice something odd about them. The wounds were clean and precise, not the kind of random injuries you'd expect from someone trying to fend off an attacker. They looked almost deliberate. "Dr. Wong," Maya called out quietly, motioning for her to come closer. "What is it?" Dr. Wong asked, stepping away from the CT scan results she had been reviewing. "These wounds," Maya said, pointing to Alexander's hands. "Look at the pattern. They're too uniform, too controlled. And, look here." She indicated a particular cut on his left palm. "This is straight and deep, like it was made with a blade, but it's in exactly the wrong place for a defensive wound." Dr. Wong examined the injuries more closely, her expression growing concerned. "You're right. These look more like..." She trailed off, unwilling to voice what they were both thinking. "Like he made them himself," Maya finished quietly. Before Dr. Wong could respond, Alexander began to stir. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. He tried to sit up, but Maya gently pressed him back down onto the examination table. "Mr. Blackstone, you're in the hospital," Maya said softly. "You were found unconscious behind your office building. Do you remember what happened?" Alexander's gaze wandered around the trauma bay before finally focusing on Maya's face. For a moment, confusion clouded his features, and then recognition dawned. "The nurse," he said weakly. "From the medical center." "Yes, it's Maya Rodriguez. You're safe now, but you're hurt. We need to ask you some questions about what happened." Alexander tried to sit up again, wincing as pain shot through his head. "I have to get back to work. The Taiwan deal. Mr. Blackstone, you have a concussion," Dr. Wong interrupted, stepping into his field of view. "You're not going anywhere until we make sure you don't have any serious brain injury." "I'm fine," Alexander protested, but his words were slightly slurred, and Maya could see that even the effort of speaking was causing him pain. "You're not fine," Maya said firmly. "Someone attacked you. Do you remember anything about what happened?" Alexander closed his eyes, and Maya watched as his face contorted with what looked like physical pain, but she suspected it might be something else entirely. When he opened his eyes again, they held a haunting emptiness that made Maya's heart clench. "I don't remember," he said quietly. "I was working late, trying to finalize the contract terms for the Taiwan deal. The next thing I knew, I was waking up here." Dr. Wong exchanged a meaningful glance with Maya. "Mr. Blackstone, we need to call the police. This was an assault, and they'll want to investigate." "No," Alexander said immediately, and the sharpness in his voice was unmistakable. "No police." "Sir, this is a serious crime." Dr. Wong began. "I said no police," Alexander repeated, struggling to sit up despite the obvious pain it caused him. "I don't want this getting out to the media. It would be bad for the company, bad for employee morale." Maya studied his face carefully. In her years of emergency medicine, she had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when patients weren't telling the whole truth. Alexander's refusal to involve the police, combined with the suspicious nature of his wounds, was setting off every alarm bell in her head. "Mr. Blackstone," Maya said gently, "can I speak with you privately for a moment?" Dr. Wong nodded and stepped back, pulling the curtain around the trauma bay to give them some privacy. Maya pulled a chair up next to Alexander's bed and sat down, bringing herself to his eye level. "What really happened tonight?" she asked quietly. "I told you, I don't remember." "The wounds on your hands," Maya pressed gently. "They don't look like defensive injuries." Alexander's face went very still, and Maya could see the exact moment when her words hit home. His jaw tightened, and he turned his face away from her. "I don't know what you're implying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm not implying anything," Maya said softly.
I'm asking. As someone who's been where you are. Alexander turned back to look at her, surprise evident in his battered features. What do you mean? Maya hesitated for a moment, knowing that what she was about to share would forever change the dynamic between them.
But something in Alexander's eyes, a desperate loneliness that mirrored her own past struggles, made the decision for her. I mean that I recognize the signs, she said quietly. The exhaustion, the pressure, the feeling that you're carrying the weight of the world and you can't let anyone down. I know what it feels like when that pressure becomes too much to bear. You don't know anything about my life, Alexander said, but there was no anger in his voice, only a bone-deep weariness.
Maybe not, Maya acknowledged.
But I know what it feels like to hurt so much that physical pain seems like a relief. I know what it's like to feel so out of control that causing yourself pain is the only way to feel like you have power over something, anything.
Alexander stared at her for a long moment, and Maya could see the internal battle playing out across his features.
Part of him wanted to maintain the facade, to keep pretending that everything was fine. But another part of him, the part that was tired of pretending, tired of carrying everything alone, was desperate to be honest with someone. The deal fell through, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 weeks of work, 3 weeks without sleep, 3 weeks of 18-hour days, and it all fell apart in a single phone call.
Maya waited, not wanting to interrupt now that he was finally talking.
12,000 jobs, Alexander continued, staring at the ceiling.
Gone. Just like that. And it's my fault.
I should have seen it coming, should have had a backup plan, should have been better. One failed deal doesn't make you a failure, Maya said gently.
Alexander laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't understand. This isn't just about one deal. The company is in trouble. Has been for months.
I've been hiding it, moving money around, making promises I'm not sure I can keep. And, tonight, when I got the call that the Taiwan deal was dead. He trailed off, and Maya could see tears gathering in his eyes. This powerful man, who commanded respect and fear from business leaders around the world, was falling apart right in front of her.
I went to my office to think, Alexander said.
To try to figure out how to fix it, how to save the company, how to save everyone's jobs.
But I couldn't think.
My head was spinning, my chest was tight, and I kept thinking about my father.
Your father?
He killed himself when I was 22, Alexander said, and the words seemed to cost him everything. His company was failing, and he couldn't handle the shame of it. He locked himself in his study and he couldn't face the people who had trusted him. Maya felt her heart break for him.
Mr. Blackstone-Alexander, he corrected quietly. If we're going to do this, if I'm going to tell you everything, you might as well call me Alexander.
Alexander, Maya said softly.
What happened in the alley tonight?
Alexander closed his eyes, and Maya could see him gathering the courage to continue. I was walking to my car, and I kept thinking about my father. About how he took the easy way out, left everyone else to clean up his mess. And I was so angry at him, but also, I understood. For the first time, I understood why he did it. So you hurt yourself, Maya said, not making it a question.
Alexander nodded, not opening his eyes.
I found a piece of broken glass in the alley. I don't even remember picking it up, but suddenly, I was holding it, and the pain it was better than the thoughts in my head.
For just a moment, it was quiet up there.
Maya reached out and gently took his uninjured hand.
And then?
Then, I threw myself against the brick wall, Alexander said, his voice getting smaller. I hit my head hard enough to knock myself out.
I guess I thought
maybe if I hurt myself enough, maybe I'd feel something other than this crushing weight. They sat in silence for a moment, Alexander's revelation hanging heavy between them. Maya had suspected something like this, but hearing him confirm it still hit her like a physical blow.
Alexander, Maya said carefully, have you ever felt this way before?
No, he said immediately, then paused.
Maybe. I don't know. I've always been able to handle pressure, always been able to push through. But, lately.
Lately what?
Lately, I feel like I'm drowning, Alexander admitted.
Like I'm fighting to keep my head above water, but the waves keep getting bigger and I keep getting more tired.
Maya squeezed his hand gently. When was the last time you talked to someone about how you're feeling? A friend, a family member, a therapist?
Alexander opened his eyes and looked at her with something like bewilderment.
I don't have friends. I have business associates, board members, employees. People who depend on me or want something from me. And I can't show weakness to any of them. What about family? My parents are dead.
I have a sister, but we haven't spoken in 5 years. She thinks I'm a heartless workaholic who cares more about money than relationships.
Alexander paused. She's probably right. Maya felt overwhelmed by the depth of Alexander's isolation.
Here was a man who wielded enormous power and influence, who was surrounded by people every day, but who had no one in his life who truly knew him or cared about his well-being.
Alexander, Maya said gently, you need help. Professional help. I can't, Alexander said immediately.
If word got out that I was seeing a psychiatrist, if the board found out I was unstable. If the board finds out you're dead, they'll have bigger problems to worry about, Maya said bluntly. And if you keep going down this path, that's where this ends.
Alexander flinched at her directness, but Maya could see that her words had hit home.
She had learned that sometimes shock therapy was the only way to break through the walls people built around themselves. I can't show weakness, Alexander repeated, but his voice sounded less certain than before.
Getting help isn't weakness, Maya said firmly. It's the opposite.
It takes incredible strength to admit you're struggling and ask for support.
Easy for you to say.
You're not responsible for thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in investments. Maya was quiet for a moment, debating how much of her own story to share.
Finally, she decided that Alexander needed to hear it.
You're right, she said.
I'm not responsible for a business empire. But I was responsible for something else once. Something that mattered just as much to me as your company matters to you.
Alexander looked at her with curiosity, and Maya could see that she had his full attention.
I wasn't always a nurse, Maya continued.
Before I went to nursing school, I spent 8 years in the military.
I was a Navy SEAL. Alexander's eyes widened in shock. You were a SEAL? Maya nodded. One of the first women to complete the program when they opened it to female candidates. I was 20 years old, and I thought I was invincible.
I was responsible for the lives of my team members, for mission success, for national security objectives that I couldn't even fully understand at the time.
What happened?
Maya took a deep breath, preparing to share a story she had told very few people.
We were on a mission in Afghanistan. Intelligence gathering, supposed to be low risk.
But the intelligence was wrong, and we walked into an ambush. 3 of my team members were killed, and 2 others were critically wounded. Alexander listened intently, and Maya could see that her story was resonating with him in ways she had hoped it would. I blamed myself, Maya continued. I was the team leader, and I should have seen the signs, should have questioned the intelligence, should have been better. I carried that guilt for years. I started having panic attacks, nightmares, episodes where I couldn't function. I was drowning in responsibility and guilt, just like you are now. But you got help, Alexander said quietly.
Eventually.
But not before I tried to handle it on my own, not before I nearly destroyed myself with self-blame and isolation. I learned the hard way that strength isn't about carrying everything alone. It's about knowing when to ask for help and having the courage to accept it. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, processing what Maya had shared.
Why are you telling me this? Because I see myself in you, Maya said honestly.
The isolation, the pressure, the feeling that everything depends on you and you alone. I know how that feels, and I know where it leads if you don't get help.
And what happened? After you got help? I realized that I couldn't stay in the military.
The pressure, the constant life or death decisions, the weight of command, it was destroying me.
So I left, and I became a nurse. I found a way to help people that didn't require me to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. But, that's different, Alexander protested. You could walk away. I can't just abandon my company. I'm not suggesting you abandon anything, Maya said gently.
I'm suggesting you find ways to share the load. Delegate more responsibility, build a stronger support system, take care of yourself so you can take care of everyone else. Alexander closed his eyes again, and Maya could see the exhaustion and pain etched in every line of his face.
I don't know how, he admitted finally.
That's okay, Maya said softly. That's what professional help is for. To teach you coping strategies, to help you develop healthier ways of managing stress and responsibility.
And, if I can't? If I'm not strong enough to change? Maya squeezed his hand again. Alexander, you survived being beaten up and having a concussion.
You built a billion-dollar company from nothing.
You've already proven you're strong enough to handle anything. This is just a different kind of challenge.
Dr. Wong knocked gently on the frame of the trauma bay before pulling back the curtain. I hate to interrupt, but we have the CT results back. The good news is there's no sign of serious brain injury, just a mild concussion.
But, I want to keep you overnight for observation. Alexander started to protest, but Maya cut him off.
He'll stay, she said firmly.
And, Dr. Wong, I think we should have a psychiatric consultation as well. No, Alexander said immediately.
Yes, Maya said, her voice brooking no argument.
Alexander, what happened tonight could have killed you.
If you had hit your head just a little harder, if you had been alone for much longer, we might be having a very different conversation right now.
Dr. Wong looked between them with understanding.
She had seen enough cases like this to recognize the signs.
I think Maya's right, Mr. Blackstone. A psychiatric consultation is standard protocol for cases involving self-harm. This will ruin me, Alexander said desperately. If word gets out.
Medical records are confidential, Dr. Wong assured him.
And, Maya is right, this could have been much worse. You need professional support to deal with whatever led you to this point. Alexander looked at Maya with something approaching panic. Will you stay? While they do the consultation?
Maya felt her heart clench at the vulnerability in his voice. This powerful man was terrified of facing his demons alone, and, despite everything that had happened between them, he was turning to her for support.
Of course, Maya said gently. I'll stay as long as you need me to. As Dr. Wong left to arrange the psychiatric consultation, Maya found herself studying Alexander's face once more.
She had seen him at his most arrogant and dismissive, and now she had seen him at his most vulnerable and broken. Neither version was the complete picture of who he was, but both were real parts of a complex man who was struggling with burdens too heavy for any one person to carry.
Maya, Alexander said quietly, why are you helping me? After the way I treated you before, after the things I said. Maya considered the question for a moment.
Because everyone deserves compassion, she said finally. Because I know what it's like to be lost and afraid. And, because despite everything, I think you're a good person who's been carrying too much for too long.
I'm not a good person, Alexander said with conviction.
I've made decisions that hurt people, destroyed companies, prioritized profit over everything else.
Maybe, Maya acknowledged. But, tonight, when you were in pain, you didn't hurt anyone else. You hurt yourself.
That tells me something about who you really are underneath all the business success and public image.
Alexander was quiet for a moment.
I'm scared, he admitted finally.
That's okay, Maya said softly. Being scared means you're still fighting. It means you still care about living, about getting better. We can work with scared. We can't work with giving up.
As they waited for the psychiatric consultant to arrive, Maya found herself thinking about the unexpected turns her life had taken. She had come to Alexander Blackstone's medical center 2 weeks ago as a tired nurse picking up extra shifts to pay her brother's tuition. Now she was sitting beside one of the most powerful men in the city, holding his hand while he fought for his mental health and, possibly his life. She had no way of knowing that this night would change both of their lives forever, or that the vulnerable man lying broken in the hospital bed would soon become the most important person in her world. All she knew was that someone needed help, and she had the skills and experience to provide it. As Maya had learned in her military service, sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons or strategy, but with simple human compassion and the courage to stand beside someone when they needed it most. The psychiatric consultation lasted 3 hours, and Maya stayed by Alexander's side through all of it. Dr. Sarah Chen, the hospital's chief psychiatrist, was a gentle but thorough woman who specialized in high-functioning individuals dealing with extreme stress and trauma. As Maya listened to Alexander slowly open up about the pressures he faced, his father's suicide, and the crushing weight of responsibility that had driven him to harm himself, she began to understand the true depth of his struggles. By the time Dr. Chen finished her evaluation, it was nearly 4 a.m. Alexander had been diagnosed with severe depression, anxiety, and what Dr. Chen termed executive stress syndrome, a condition she had seen increasingly among high-level business leaders who pushed themselves beyond human limits. "Mr. Blackstone," Dr. Chen said as she prepared to leave, "I'm going to be frank with you. You're in crisis. The incident tonight wasn't an accident or a moment of weakness, it was your mind's way of trying to cope with more stress than any human being should carry. If you don't make significant changes, this will happen again, and next time you might not be as fortunate." Alexander nodded weakly from his hospital bed. The medication they had given him for pain was making him drowsy, but Maya could see that Dr. Chen's words were penetrating his exhaustion. "What kind of changes?" Alexander asked. "Immediate stress reduction, delegation of responsibilities, regular therapy sessions, possibly medication to help with the depression and anxiety," Dr. Chen replied. "And, most importantly, you need to build a support system. You can't continue to face these challenges alone." After Dr. Chen left, Alexander and Maya sat in comfortable silence. The hospital room had grown quiet, with only the occasional sound of footsteps in the hallway and the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. 3 weeks, Alexander said suddenly. "What?" Maya asked. "Dr. Chen said I need to take 3 weeks away from work. Minimum. She wants me to check into an outpatient treatment program." Alexander's voice was filled with disbelief. "I can't be away from the company for 3 weeks. The board will panic, the stock price will tank, employees will start looking for other jobs." Maya pulled her chair closer to his bed. "Alexander, what good will you be to your company if you're dead?" "But 3 weeks is a very small price to pay for your life," Maya finished firmly. "Besides, don't you have a second in command? Someone who can handle things while you recover?" Alexander was quiet for a moment. "My COO, Jennifer Martinez. She's brilliant, probably more qualified than I am for half the decisions I make. But the board hired me, they expect me to be there." "Then, you need to trust her," Maya said simply. "And you need to trust that your company is strong enough to survive 3 weeks without you personally managing every detail." Alexander turned to look at her, his gray eyes clouded with fear and uncertainty. "What if everything falls apart while I'm gone?" "What if it doesn't?" Maya countered. "What if delegating some responsibility actually makes the company stronger? What if giving other people a chance to step up and prove themselves creates a better, more resilient organization?" "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple," Maya acknowledged. "But it's necessary. Alexander, you've been operating under the assumption that you're the only person capable of making good decisions for your company. But that kind of thinking is what got you into this situation in the first place." Alexander was quiet, considering her words. Maya could see the internal battle playing out across his features, the part of him that knew she was right warring with the part that had been conditioned to believe that letting go of control meant failure. "Will you help me?" Alexander asked suddenly. "Help you how?" "I don't know how to step back. I don't know how to delegate, how to trust other people with things that matter. I've been doing everything myself for so long that I don't even know where to start." Maya felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. What Alexander was asking went far beyond her role as a nurse, far beyond the professional relationship they had established. But, looking at his vulnerable, hopeful expression, she found herself nodding before she had fully thought through the implications.
Okay, she said. I'll help you. But, I have conditions. Name them. First, you do exactly what Dr. Chen recommends.
The therapy, the medication if she thinks you need it, the full 3 weeks away from work. No shortcuts, no exceptions. Alexander hesitated for a moment, then nodded.
Agreed. Second, you're completely honest with me.
If you're struggling, if you're having thoughts of hurting yourself again, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you tell me immediately.
No trying to handle it on your own. That's going to be harder, Alexander admitted. I know. But, it's non-negotiable. I can't help you if you're not honest about what you're going through. Okay. What's the third condition? Maya took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to say would change everything between them. I want to know who you really are. Not the CEO, not the public figure, not the man in the expensive suits. I want to know Alexander the person. Your fears, your dreams, what makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night beyond work stress. If I'm going to help you rebuild your life, I need to understand what kind of life you actually want. Alexander stared at her for a long moment, and Maya could see surprise and something that might have been gratitude in his expression. You realize you're asking me to be vulnerable with someone I barely know? Yes, I am. Because vulnerability is the opposite of the isolation that brought you to this point. You've spent years building walls to protect yourself, but those same walls have been keeping out the connections you need to survive. And what do you get out of this? Alexander asked. Why would you want to take on someone else's problems? You have your own life, your own responsibilities. Maya had been asking herself the same question since she had agreed to help him. The logical answer was that she was a healthcare professional who cared about her patients' well-being. But she knew it went deeper than that. Because I see something in you that reminds me of who I used to be, Maya said honestly. And because I believe that everyone deserves a chance to find happiness and peace, even someone who thinks they don't deserve it. Alexander was quiet for a moment. I don't remember the last time I was happy, he admitted quietly. Then, that's where we start, Maya said softly. We figure out what happiness looks like for you, and we build toward that. The next morning, Maya helped Alexander check out of the hospital and drove him to his penthouse apartment in downtown. She had expected something cold and sterile, a space that reflected the corporate efficiency of his public persona. Instead, she found herself in a beautifully appointed home filled with warm colors, comfortable furniture, and walls lined with books. This is not what I expected, Maya said, looking around the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows and cozy reading nooks. What did you expect? Alexander asked, settling carefully onto the leather sofa. He was still moving slowly from his injuries, and Maya could see that he was in considerable pain. Something more like your office. All glass and metal and intimidation. Alexander smiled slightly, the first genuine smile Maya had seen from him. This is my sanctuary. The only place where I can be myself instead of the person everyone expects me to be. Maya studied the room more carefully, noting the personal touches that revealed glimpses of who Alexander really was. There were photographs of landscapes and wildlife, suggesting an appreciation for nature that seemed at odds with his corporate image. The books ranged from business texts to literary fiction to philosophy, indicating a mind that craved intellectual stimulation beyond profit margins and market analysis. You're full of surprises, Maya said. I used to be, anyway. I can't remember the last time I did anything that surprised even myself. Maya helped Alexander settle into his apartment and get organized for his 3-week leave of absence. The first challenge came when he had to call his COO to explain the situation. Maya listened from the kitchen as Alexander struggled to find words that would convey the seriousness of his condition without revealing too much detail. Jennifer, I need to take some time off for medical reasons, Alexander said into the phone. 3 weeks, starting immediately. Maya could hear Jennifer's shocked response even from the other room. In the 7 years she had worked as Alexander's second in command,
he had never taken more than a long weekend away from the office. "I can't go into details," Alexander continued, "but it's serious enough that my doctor insists I stay away from work completely. I need you to handle the board meeting next week, and I'm authorizing you to make any decisions necessary to keep operations running smoothly." The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with Jennifer expressing concern for Alexander's health while simultaneously panicking about the responsibilities he was placing on her shoulders. Maya could hear the strain in Alexander's voice as he tried to reassure her while battling his own anxiety about stepping back. When he finally hung up, Alexander looked exhausted and defeated. "She thinks I'm abandoning her," he said. "I can hear it in her voice. She's terrified." "Of course she is," Maya said gently. "This is new for both of you. But terror doesn't mean incompetence. You hired her because she's capable of handling this kind of responsibility. Now you need to trust that judgment. What if I'm wrong? What if she makes decisions that hurt the company? Then, you'll deal with it when you get back," Maya said firmly. "Alexander, you have to let go of the need to control everything. It's literally killing you." The first week of Alexander's leave was the hardest. He was restless, anxious, and constantly checking his phone for updates from the office. Maya had taken vacation time from the hospital to help him through the initial transition, and she quickly realized that keeping him away from work was going to require constant vigilance. "The stock price dropped 2 points yesterday," Alexander said on Wednesday morning, staring at his laptop screen despite Maya's repeated efforts to get him to put it away. "And?" Maya asked. "And that represents millions of dollars in lost value. Investors are nervous because I'm not visible, not making statements, not reassuring the market." Maya walked over and gently closed his laptop. "Alexander, we've talked about this. You cannot manage your recovery by monitoring every fluctuation in your business. The stock price will go up and down regardless of whether you watch it or not. But if I could just make one statement, just let people know that everything is stable." "No," Maya said firmly. Dr. Chen was very clear about complete disengagement from work for the first 2 weeks. "Your brain needs time to heal, to develop new patterns of thinking that don't revolve around constant crisis management." Alexander stood up abruptly and began pacing around his living room, a habit Maya had noticed he fell into whenever his anxiety spiked. "I can't do this, Maya. I can't just sit here while everything I've built potentially falls apart." "It's not falling apart," Maya said calmly. "Jennifer sent you an update yesterday. The Taiwan replacement deal is moving forward ahead of schedule, the quarterly reports are on track, and employee morale is actually up because people feel more empowered to make decisions." "That's what she's telling me," Alexander said. "But what if she's just trying to protect me from bad news?" Maya recognized the spiral of anxious thinking that was threatening to pull Alexander back into his old patterns. She had seen the same pattern in herself during her own recovery from PTSD, the mind's tendency to create worst-case scenarios when faced with uncertainty and lack of control. "Alexander, stop," Maya said, standing up and moving to intercept his pacing. "Look at me." Alexander paused mid-stride and turned to face her, his gray eyes wild with anxiety. "What's the worst thing that could happen?" Maya asked. "The company could fail, thousands of people could lose their jobs, investors could lose billions of dollars. And then, what?" Alexander looked at her in confusion. "What do you mean, then, what?" "That would be catastrophic. I mean, what would happen to you personally if all of that came to pass?" Alexander opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, clearly struggling with the question. I don't know. Would you die?" Maya asked gently. "No. Would you be homeless?" "No, I have enough personal savings to live comfortably for the rest of my life." "Would the people you care about abandon you?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if there are any people I care about who aren't connected to my business success." Maya felt her heart break a little at his admission. "Alexander, do you hear what you just said? You've built your entire identity, your entire support system, around your professional success. That's not sustainable.
It's not healthy. And it's not a real life. Alexander sank back onto the sofa, the fight going out of him as suddenly as it had emerged. So what am I supposed to do? How do I build a life that isn't centered around work when work is all I know?
We start small, Maya said, sitting down beside him. We find little things that bring you joy or peace or satisfaction that have nothing to do with business.
We build from there. I don't remember what brings me joy. Maya looked around his apartment again, noting the personal touches that revealed glimpses of his authentic self. What about reading? You have an incredible book collection. I haven't read for pleasure in years.
Every book I pick up is either business-related or something I think will make me more effective at work.
Okay, what about nature? You have beautiful landscape photographs everywhere. Do you enjoy being outdoors? Alexander followed her gaze to the photographs on his walls.
I used to hike when I was younger.
Before the company got so demanding.
I had a favorite trail in the mountains about 2 hours north of here. I used to go there when I needed to think or when I felt overwhelmed.
When was the last time you went there? Maybe 5 years ago?
I kept meaning to go back, but there was always some crisis that needed my attention.
Maya smiled.
Well, you don't have any crises to attend to right now.
What if we went there tomorrow? Alexander looked at her in surprise. You want to go hiking with me? I want you to reconnect with something that used to bring you peace.
And, yes, I'd like to come with you. I think you could use the company, and I'd enjoy getting out of the city for a day. Maya, you've already done so much for me.
You don't need to. I want to, Maya interrupted gently. Alexander, friendship is about more than professional obligation or duty. Sometimes people help each other simply because they care.
Alexander stared at her for a long moment, and Maya could see something shifting in his expression.
Is that what this is? Friendship?
I hope so, Maya said honestly. I know we started under unusual circumstances, but I've come to care about what happens to you. Not as a patient, but as a person. I haven't had a real friend in a very long time, Alexander admitted.
I'm not sure I remember how.
Neither did I, when I first left the military. I had spent so many years in a rigid hierarchy, or relationships were defined by rank and mission objectives, that I forgot how to connect with people as equals.
It takes practice. How did you learn?
Maya smiled, remembering her own difficult transition back to civilian life.
Trial and error, mostly.
And by accepting help from people who saw something worth caring about in me, even when I couldn't see it in myself.
Alexander nodded slowly. The hiking trail sounds nice. I'd like to show it to you. Then, it's settled.
Tomorrow we'll take your first official step toward building a life that includes more than work. As Maya prepared to leave Alexander's apartment for the night, she found herself reflecting on how much both of their lives had changed in just a few weeks. She had started as his nurse, become his advocate, and now was apparently becoming his friend. The professional boundaries she usually maintained had blurred in ways that should have made her uncomfortable, but instead felt natural and right. Alexander walked her to the door, still moving carefully because of his injuries but looking more relaxed than she had seen him since that first night in the hospital.
Maya, he said as she gathered her purse and jacket. Thank you. For everything.
For saving my life, for staying with me, for caring about what happens to me.
I don't know how to repay you.
You don't need to repay me, Maya said softly.
Just get better. Build a life that makes you happy. That's payment enough.
As Maya drove home through the quiet city streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that her involvement in Alexander's recovery was about more than professional duty or even friendship. There was something about his vulnerability, his genuine desire to change, and his gratitude for her help that touched her in ways she hadn't expected. She had spent years since leaving the military focused on her work, on helping her brother through college, on building a stable life that didn't involve the kind of emotional intensity she had experienced during her service. But Alexander's crisis had awakened something in her that she had thought was safely buried, the need to be needed, to make a real difference in someone's life, to matter to another person in profound and lasting ways. As she pulled into her apartment complex, Maya realized that helping Alexander heal wasn't just about him. It was about her own journey toward connection, toward building the kind of meaningful relationship she had sacrificed in pursuit of safety and stability. They were both learning how to be human again, how to trust and be trusted, how to let someone else matter enough to be worth the risk of getting hurt. Tomorrow's hike would be more than just a recreational activity or a step in Alexander's recovery. It would be the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find, a friendship that would challenge them both to become better versions of themselves, and, maybe, eventually, something even more precious than that. The mountain trail was more challenging than Maya had expected, winding through dense forest and rocky terrain that required careful footing and steady breathing. Alexander moved with surprising grace despite his recent injuries, and Maya could see glimpses of the athlete he must have been in his younger years. The morning air was crisp and clean, a sharp contrast to the pollution and noise of the city they had left behind. They had been hiking for about an hour when Alexander suddenly stopped on a small ridge that offered a panoramic view of the valley below. Maya watched as his entire posture changed, the tension leaving his shoulders as he stood quietly taking in the landscape. "This is where I used to come when everything felt impossible," Alexander said softly. "When I was building the company and there were weeks when I wasn't sure we'd make payroll, when investors were pulling out and employees were jumping ship to competitors. I'd drive up here and remind myself that there was a world beyond quarterly reports and board meetings." Maya stood beside him, understanding immediately why this place had called to him. The view was breathtaking, rolling hills covered in forest, a silver stream threading through the valley, mountains rising in the distance like ancient guardians. It was the kind of vista that put human concerns in perspective, that reminded you of your place in something much larger than yourself. "How did you find this place?" Maya asked. "My father brought me here when I was 12, Alexander replied. "It was one of the few times I remember him being completely relaxed, completely present. He wasn't thinking about work or stress or responsibilities. He was just my dad." Maya could hear the pain in his voice when he mentioned his father, the complicated mixture of love and anger that came with losing someone to suicide. She had seen that same pain in the eyes of fellow veterans who had lost friends to PTSD and depression. "Tell me about him," Maya said gently. "Not the businessman who died, but the father who brought you here." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the valley. "He was larger than life when I was little. He seemed to know everything, could fix anything, had an answer for every question I asked. He taught me to fish, to identify different types of trees, to read the weather by watching the clouds. He sounds like a good father." He was, when he was present. But, as his company grew, as the pressure mounted, he became more and more distant. "By the time I was in high school, I barely saw him. He was always at the office or traveling for business. And, when he was home, he was exhausted and distracted." Maya nodded, understanding. "And you swore you wouldn't end up like that." "Exactly. But somehow I did anyway. I became him, just with better technology and more expensive suits." They continued hiking, following a narrow path that curved through stands of pine and oak trees. Maya noticed that Alexander seemed more at peace here than she had seen him anywhere else. His movements were relaxed, his breathing steady, and, for the first time since she had met him, he looked like a man who was exactly where he wanted to be. "Maya," Alexander said as they navigated a particularly steep section of trail, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "When you left the military, when you decided to become a nurse, was it hard to start over? To build a completely different kind of life?" Maya considered the question carefully. It was something she had thought about often during her own transition, but she had rarely discussed it with anyone else. "It was terrifying," she said honestly. "I had spent 8 years with a very clear purpose, a defined role, a structured environment where I knew exactly what was expected of me. Suddenly, I was in civilian life with complete freedom to choose my path, and I had no idea what I actually wanted." "How did you figure it out?" "Trial and error, mostly. I tried different things, made mistakes, discovered what felt meaningful and what felt empty. It took years to build a life that felt authentic to who I really was, not just who I thought I should be.
Alexander nodded thoughtfully.
I've been so focused on success, on meeting external expectations, that I'm not sure I know who I really am underneath all of that. That's why we're here, Maya said, gesturing to the forest around them. To give you space to remember, or maybe to discover for the first time. They reached Alexander's favorite spot around noon, a small clearing beside a stream where flat rocks provided natural seating and the sound of running water created a peaceful soundtrack. Alexander pulled a backpack from his shoulders and began unpacking a lunch he had prepared that morning.
Maya was impressed by the simple meal he had put together: fresh bread, cheese, fruit, and a thermos of coffee.
You didn't strike me as someone who knew how to pack a hiking lunch.
Alexander smiled.
I used to do a lot of outdoor activities before work consumed my life.
Rock climbing, backpacking, even some survival training. I guess some skills stick with you even when you don't use them for years.
They ate in comfortable silence, listening to the stream and watching clouds drift across the blue sky above the forest canopy. Maya found herself studying Alexander's profile as he gazed into the water, noting how different he looked away from his corporate environment. The stress lines around his eyes had softened, and his expression held a peacefulness she had never seen before. This is the first time in probably 5 years that I've gone more than 2 hours without thinking about work, Alexander said suddenly.
How does it feel?
Strange. Like I'm forgetting something important, but also lighter somehow.
Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there.
Maya pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them, a position that always helped her think clearly.
Alexander, can I ask you something that might be difficult?
Go ahead.
What are you afraid will happen if you're not constantly controlling every aspect of your business? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, clearly thinking about his answer.
I'm afraid that everything will fall apart, he said finally. That without me there to make the right decisions, to prevent mistakes, to push for excellence, the company will fail and all those people who depend on me will suffer.
But what if that's not true? What if your company is stronger than you think, your employees more capable than you believe?
Then, I've been living a lie for 15 years, Alexander said quietly.
Or maybe you've been living a partial truth that's outlived its usefulness, Maya suggested gently.
Maybe your company needed that level of hands-on control when it was small and struggling, but now it needs something different from you.
Like what?
Vision, strategic thinking, leadership rather than management.
The ability to see the big picture instead of getting lost in the details.
Alexander picked up a small stone and tossed it into the stream, watching the ripples spread outward from where it landed. My father used to say that the hardest part of building something successful was learning when to let other people help carry the load.
He said he never figured that out, and it killed him. What do you think he meant?
I think he meant that success can become a prison if you don't know how to share it, delegate it, trust other people with pieces of it. You become so afraid of losing what you've built that you destroy yourself trying to protect it. Maya could see that Alexander was having a breakthrough, connecting his father's experience with his own patterns in ways that might finally allow him to make different choices.
So the question becomes, Maya said carefully, are you willing to risk losing some control in order to save your life? When you put it that way, it seems obvious.
But it doesn't feel obvious when I'm sitting in a board meeting and someone is proposing a strategy that could cost millions if it goes wrong. That's where trust comes in. And where you need to remember that your judgment about people, your ability to hire good employees and build strong teams, is one of your greatest skills as a leader. Alexander turned to look at her, and Maya was struck by the intensity of his gaze.
How did you get so wise about things you've never experienced?
Leadership is leadership, Maya replied. Whether you're managing a Navy SEAL team or running a corporation, the principles are similar. You have to trust your people, communicate clearly, and know when to step back and let others do what they do best.
And what happens when they make mistakes?
You learn from the mistakes, you adjust your approach, and you move forward. The alternative, trying to control everything yourself, guarantees that you'll make bigger mistakes because you'll be too exhausted and overwhelmed to think clearly.
They spent the afternoon exploring more of the trail, and Maya was amazed by the transformation in Alexander.
Away from his corporate environment, he was relaxed, curious, and, surprisingly funny. He pointed out different types of birds, identified edible plants, and shared stories from his childhood that revealed a side of him that had been completely hidden beneath his business persona. As they made their way back toward the parking area late in the afternoon, Maya realized that this had been one of the most peaceful days she had experienced in years. Her own life had been so focused on work and responsibility that she had forgotten the simple pleasure of spending time in nature with someone whose company she enjoyed. "Maya," Alexander said as they descended a particularly steep section of trail, "I want you to know that today has been a gift. I can't remember the last time I felt this human." "You are human, Alexander. You just forgot for a while." "I'm starting to remember," he said softly. When they reached Alexander's car, both of them were reluctant to leave the peaceful atmosphere of the mountains behind. The thought of returning to the city, to the pressure and noise and constant demands for attention, felt jarring after the tranquility they had found on the trail. "I want to start coming here regularly," Alexander said as he loaded their backpacks into the trunk. "Maybe once a week, at least while I'm on leave. It helps me think more clearly than I have in years." "That sounds like a good plan," Maya agreed. "You could make it part of your ongoing stress management strategy." The drive back to the city gave them time to talk about what Alexander had learned about himself during the day. He was beginning to understand that his need for control stemmed from fear of failure, fear of disappointing people, fear of becoming like his father. But he was also beginning to see that his fear was actually making him less effective, not more. "I've been operating from a place of anxiety for so long that I thought it was normal," Alexander said as they navigated the winding mountain roads. "I thought the constant stress was the price of success." "Success shouldn't require you to sacrifice your health and happiness," Maya replied. "If it does, then you need to redefine what success means." "What does success mean to you?" Maya thought about the question as they wound through the foothills toward the city lights beginning to twinkle in the distance. "I think success is being able to look at your life and feel proud of how you've treated people, knowing that you've made a positive difference in the world, and having relationships that matter more than achievements." "That's very different from how I've been measuring success." "How have you been measuring it?" "Profit margins, stock price, market share, public recognition," Alexander said. "All external metrics that can change overnight regardless of what kind of person I am." "And how has that worked out for you?" Alexander was quiet for a moment. "Not very well, obviously. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, more power and influence than most people dream of, and I was ready to kill myself because I felt empty and alone." The honesty in his voice hit Maya like a physical blow. She reached over and briefly squeezed his hand where it rested on the steering wheel. "You're not alone anymore," she said softly. Alexander glanced at her, and Maya could see tears gathering in his eyes. "I know. And I can't tell you how much that means to me." When they arrived back at Alexander's apartment building, Maya was surprised when he asked her to come upstairs for dinner. She had been planning to head home to her own apartment, but something in his expression of vulnerability that suggested he wasn't ready to be alone with his thoughts yet made her agree. Alexander's cooking skills turned out to be another hidden talent. He prepared a simple but delicious meal of grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and rice pilaf while Maya sat at his kitchen island telling him about her own experiences with outdoor adventure. "So you've done rock climbing, survival training, wilderness rescue," Alexander said as he seasoned the vegetables. "Is there anything you haven't done?" Maya laughed. "Plenty of things. I'm terrible at anything artistic, can't draw, can't sing, can't play instruments. I'm hopeless with technology more complex than basic computer programs. And I have an irrational fear of spiders that's completely at odds with my supposedly tough military background." "Spiders, really?" "8 legs are just unnatural," Maya said with mock seriousness. "Anything with that many legs is clearly up to something." Alexander's laughter was rich and genuine, and Maya realized it was the first time she had heard him laugh with real joy. The sound made her heart skip in a way that surprised her. As they ate dinner by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, their conversation ranged from childhood memories to philosophy to dreams they had nearly forgotten. Maya found herself sharing things she rarely discussed with anyone: her struggles with PTSD after leaving the military, her fears about whether she had made the right choice in becoming a nurse, her complicated relationship with her parents who had never understood her decision to join the Navy. "They wanted me to be a teacher or a social worker," Maya said. "Something safe and predictable that wouldn't take me away from home or put me in danger. They couldn't understand why I wanted to push myself, to test my limits, to serve something bigger than myself."
And, now? Do you think you made the right choice? Maya considered the question carefully.
"I think I made the right choice for who I was at the time. The military taught me discipline, resilience, leadership skills, how to function under pressure.
Those skills have served me well as a nurse. But I also think leaving when I did was the right choice.
I was starting to lose myself in the identity the military provided."
What do you mean?
"I was becoming so defined by my rank, my unit, my mission that I was forgetting who I was underneath all of that.
I was becoming a function rather than a person." Alexander nodded slowly. "That's exactly how I feel about my business identity. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I don't recognize the person staring back at me."
"The person I met on that hiking trail today," Maya said gently, "that's who you really are. The man who knows about birds and plants, who can pack a perfect lunch, who finds peace in nature, who cares deeply about doing the right thing. That person has been there all along, just buried under years of pressure and expectation."
"I want to be that person more often," Alexander said quietly.
"But I don't know how to integrate that with the responsibilities I have."
"Maybe that's something we can work on together. Finding ways to bring more of your authentic self into your professional life."
Alexander looked at her with an expression Maya was beginning to recognize, the look he got when she said something that shifted his perspective in a fundamental way.
"You really believe that's possible? That I can be successful in business while also being human?"
"I believe it's not only possible, but necessary. The version of you that I met today, relaxed, thoughtful, present, that person would probably make better business decisions than the stressed, anxious, exhausted person who's been running your company."
"How can you be so sure?" "Because good decision-making requires clarity, creativity, and emotional intelligence.
All of those things are compromised when you're operating in constant crisis mode."
After dinner, Alexander walked Maya to her car. The city night was clear and cool, with stars visible despite the urban light pollution.
As they stood beside her car, both of them seemed reluctant to end the day.
"Maya," Alexander said, his voice uncertain, "I know I've already asked so much of you, but would you consider having dinner again tomorrow?
Not because I need medical attention or because I'm in crisis, but because
I enjoy your company. Because you make me feel like myself again."
Maya felt her heart flutter again at the vulnerability in his request. What he was asking was moving beyond their original nurse-patient relationship, beyond even the friendship they had been building. He was asking for something that felt remarkably like a date.
"I'd like that," Maya said softly. "But, Alexander, I think we need to talk about what's happening between us." "What do you mean?"
"I mean that what started as a professional relationship has become something more personal. And I want to make sure we're both clear about what that means and where it might lead." Alexander stepped closer to her, and Maya could see in his eyes that he had been thinking about the same thing. "I know we started under unusual circumstances," he said quietly. "But, Maya, you've become the most important person in my life. You've saved me in ways that go far beyond medical intervention."
"Alexander."
"I'm not asking you to make any decisions tonight," he said quickly. "I just want you to know that what I feel for you goes beyond gratitude. You've helped me remember what it feels like to be human, and I think I might be falling in love with you." Maya felt her breath catch at his words. She had been fighting her own growing feelings for Alexander, telling herself that it was just the intensity of the crisis situation, the natural bond that formed between people who had been through trauma together. But, standing here under the starlight, seeing the honesty and hope in his eyes, she could no longer deny what was happening between them. "I think I might be falling in love with you too," she admitted quietly.
Alexander's smile was like sunrise, transforming his entire face with joy and relief. "Really? Really? But, Alexander, this is complicated.
I was your nurse, you're still my patient in some ways, and we're from very different worlds. I know it's complicated, Alexander said, reaching out to gently take her hands. But, Maya, nothing about my life has been simple since the night you walked into that medical center. You've turned everything upside down, challenged everything I thought I knew about myself, and somehow made me want to be better than I ever imagined I could be. Maya looked down at their joined hands, marveling at how right it felt despite all the logical reasons why it shouldn't work.
So what do? We take it one day at a time, Alexander said softly.
We keep being honest with each other, we keep helping each other grow, and we see where this leads us. Maya nodded, feeling a sense of rightness settle over her despite her lingering concerns.
One day at a time.
As Alexander leaned down to gently kiss her forehead, Maya realized that both of their lives had changed in ways neither of them could have predicted. They had found in each other something neither had been looking for, but both desperately needed: a partner who saw past the external roles and identities to the person underneath, someone who offered not just love but the challenge to become the best version of themselves.
The road ahead would not be easy.
Alexander still had significant recovery work to do, and Maya would have to navigate the complex ethics of a relationship that had begun in a professional context. But, as she drove home through the quiet city streets, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope for a future that might include not just professional fulfillment and financial security, but real love with someone who truly knew and valued who she was. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, difficult conversations, and the ongoing work of building healthy lives and a healthy relationship. But tonight, under the stars, they had found something worth fighting for.
3 months later, Maya stood in the boardroom of Blackstone Industries, watching Alexander address his senior executives with a calm confidence she had never seen in him before.
He was explaining the new organizational structure he had implemented during his recovery, a system that distributed decision-making authority across multiple levels of leadership rather than funneling everything through his desk.
The goal isn't to reduce accountability, Alexander was saying to the assembled group of executives.
It's to increase it by empowering each department to take ownership of their results while maintaining clear communication channels and oversight. Maya smiled as she watched him field questions from his team. This was not the same man who had been found beaten and broken in an alley just months ago. This Alexander was present, engaged, and genuinely collaborative in ways that had transformed not just his own well-being but the entire culture of his company.
The transformation hadn't been easy.
There had been setbacks, moments of crisis when Alexander's old patterns threatened to resurface, and difficult conversations about trust, control, and what it really meant to be a leader rather than a manager. But, with the help of ongoing therapy, medication to manage his anxiety, and the support system he had finally allowed himself to build, Alexander had slowly become the person he was meant to be.
Maya's role in his life had evolved as well.
She had returned to work at Metropolitan General after Alexander's initial 3-week leave, but they had continued to see each other regularly. What had started as a professional relationship, then friendship, had gradually deepened into something neither of them had expected to find. 6 weeks after that first hiking trip, Alexander had asked Maya to move in with him. It had been a practical decision at first. She was spending most of her free time at his apartment anyway, helping him navigate the challenges of his recovery and adjust to his new approach to life and work. But it had quickly become clear that they functioned better as a team than either of them had functioned alone.
Maya had been nervous about the arrangement initially.
Her background was so different from Alexander's, her world so far removed from corporate boardrooms and million-dollar decisions. But Alexander had made it clear from the beginning that he valued her perspective precisely because it was different from anything he encountered in his professional environment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander was saying now, "I'd like you to meet someone who has been instrumental in helping me develop these new approaches to leadership and organizational health. Maya Rodriguez is a trauma nurse and former Navy SEAL who has been serving as a consultant on our workplace wellness initiatives." Maya felt a flutter of nervousness as all eyes in the room turned to her. This was the first time Alexander had formally introduced her to his leadership team, and she knew that how this moment went would set the tone for her future relationship with his company. "Ms. Rodriguez," said Jennifer Martinez, Alexander's COO, we've heard wonderful things about your contributions to Alexander's recovery and to our new organizational strategies. Could you tell us a bit about your background and how you became involved with Blackstone Industries? Maya stepped forward, drawing on the confidence and composure that had served her well in military leadership roles.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez.
My background is in emergency medicine and military special operations. I initially met Alexander when he was experiencing a medical crisis related to work stress and exhaustion. She paused, making eye contact with each person in the room. What I've learned through my military service and medical career is that high-performance organizations, whether they're military units or medical teams or corporations, function best when they have strong communication, clear delegation of authority, and systems that support the well-being of all team members. And how do those principles apply to what we do here? Asked James Chen, the CFO. In my experience, Maya replied, the most critical decisions are often made under pressure by people who are exhausted, stressed, and operating without adequate support systems. When leaders try to handle everything themselves, when they don't trust their teams or delegate effectively, when they sacrifice their own health for short-term results, the quality of decision-making inevitably suffers. She could see nods of recognition around the room. Many of these executives had experienced the pressure cooker environment that Alexander's leadership style had created in the past. What Alexander has done over the past 3 months, Maya continued, is implement systems that allow for better decision-making at every level. He's learned to trust his team, to delegate authority along with responsibility, and to maintain his own well-being so that he can be fully present when his leadership is needed most.
The results speak for themselves, Jennifer added.
Our employee satisfaction scores are at an all-time high, productivity is up 15%, and we've successfully completed the Taiwan acquisition while also launching 2 new product lines. Alexander smiled at Maya from across the room, and she could see the gratitude and love in his expression.
Maya has also helped me understand that sustainable success requires sustainable practices.
We can't build a company that lasts if we burn out our people, including our leadership team, in the process. After the meeting, Maya and Alexander walked through the executive floor of his building, past the same medical center where they had first met. The contrast between this moment and that first encounter was striking. Then, Alexander had been dismissive and hostile, viewing Maya as an inconvenience at best. Now, he was introducing her to his leadership team as a valued advisor and partner.
That went well, Maya said as they entered Alexander's office, a space she had helped him redesign to be more welcoming and less intimidating.
Better than well, Alexander replied, closing the door behind them.
Did you see Jennifer's face when you started talking about high-performance teams?
I think you just gave her a dozen new ideas for improving our operational efficiency. Maya settled into one of the comfortable chairs Alexander had added to his office, replacing the rigid seating that had been designed more for intimidation than collaboration.
Your team is impressive, Alexander. You've built something really special here. We've built something special, Alexander corrected gently.
Maya, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me.
Of course.
Alexander sat down across from her, his expression serious but warm.
How do you feel about making this official?
Not just the consulting work, but our relationship. I know we've been taking things slowly, being careful about the professional complications, but, Maya,
I want to marry you.
Maya felt her heart stop for a moment. They had talked about the future in general terms, had made plans for trips and projects and shared goals. But marriage was a step that would make their partnership permanent and public in ways that felt both thrilling and terrifying.
Alexander, Maya said carefully, are you sure? It's only been 3 months since your crisis.
You're still rebuilding your life, still figuring out who you are outside of the old patterns.
I'm sure, Alexander said firmly.
Maya, you've seen me at my absolute worst, broken, scared, ready to give up on everything. And you've seen me at my best, confident, peaceful, genuinely happy. You've been part of every step of my recovery, every breakthrough, every setback.
If we can build something beautiful together through all of that, I think we can handle anything.
Maya studied his face, looking for signs of the impulsiveness or desperation that might make such a major decision unwise. But what she saw was the calm certainty of a man who had learned to make decisions from a place of clarity rather than fear.
What about our different backgrounds? Maya asked.
Your world, my world, they're not exactly compatible.
Our backgrounds aren't different, Alexander said with a smile. They're complementary.
You understand pressure and responsibility and making life or death decisions under stress. I understand strategy and leadership and building systems that support people's success. Together, we understand things that neither of us could figure out alone. Maya felt tears gathering in her eyes as she realized that Alexander was right. Their relationship had never been about overcoming their differences, it had been about discovering how their different strengths made them both better.
Yes, Maya said softly. Yes, I want to marry you.
Alexander's smile was radiant as he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. I was hoping you'd say that, he said, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. I know it's presumptuous to buy a ring before asking, but I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment.
Maya laughed through her tears as Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger. It's perfect. Everything about this is perfect.
As they embraced in his office, Maya reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. She had started as a nurse responding to a medical emergency, had become a friend to a man in crisis, had evolved into a partner helping him rebuild his life, and now was about to become his wife. Maya, Alexander said as they held each other, there's something else I want to talk to you about.
What? I want to expand the wellness consulting work you've been doing.
Not just here at Blackstone, but with other companies, other leaders who are struggling with the same issues I faced.
I think we could help a lot of people.
Maya pulled back to look at him, intrigued by the idea.
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking we start a foundation. Use some of the resources I've accumulated to create programs that teach sustainable leadership, stress management, organizational health. We could work with business schools, consulting firms, maybe even military units transitioning to civilian leadership roles.
The idea excited Maya more than she had expected.
It would allow her to use both her military experience and her medical background in ways that could help prevent other people from reaching the crisis point that had nearly destroyed Alexander.
I love it, Maya said. But I have one condition. Name it.
We make sure that part of every program includes education about mental health, about recognizing the signs of depression and anxiety, about the importance of seeking help before things become critical.
Absolutely, Alexander agreed. Maya, I want to prevent other people from going through what I went through.
But, more than that, I want to help them find what I found, the understanding that true strength comes from connection, from vulnerability, from letting other people help carry the load. 6 months later, Maya stood in the same mountain clearing where she and Alexander had shared their first real conversation about life beyond work. But, this time, she was wearing a white dress, and Alexander was wearing a tuxedo, and they were surrounded by friends and family who had come to witness their wedding. The ceremony was small and intimate, exactly what both of them had wanted.
Maya's brother had flown in from college to walk her down the aisle. Alexander's sister, with whom he had reconciled during his recovery, served as his best woman.
Dr. Chen, who had become both a friend and an ongoing therapist for both of them, officiated the ceremony. Maya and Alexander, Dr. Chen was saying, have shown us all what it means to love someone not despite their struggles, but because of their courage in facing those struggles. They have built a partnership based on honesty, mutual support, and the understanding that we are all stronger together than we could ever be alone. As they exchanged vows in the place where Alexander had first begun to remember who he really was, Maya felt a sense of completeness she had never experienced before. She was no longer just a nurse, or a former SEAL, or someone defined by her professional roles. She was a partner, a wife, a woman who had found in love not just happiness but purpose. Alexander, Maya said during her vows, you taught me that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about helping someone become who they were always meant to be. You showed me that love isn't about finding someone who doesn't need help, but about finding someone worth helping, someone who helps you in return. Maya, Alexander replied, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You showed me that strength isn't about controlling everything, but about trusting the right people with the things that matter most.
You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the price of admission to a real life.
As they kissed to seal their marriage, surrounded by the forest and mountains that had witnessed Alexander's rebirth and the beginning of their love story, Maya knew that they had found something rare and precious. They had found a love that made them both better, braver, and more fully themselves. The foundation they had started was already helping business leaders across the country develop healthier approaches to success and leadership. Alexander's company continued to thrive under his more collaborative leadership style. Maya had transitioned from hospital nursing to full-time consulting and program development, work that used all of her skills and experience in deeply satisfying ways. But, more than their professional success, more than the lives they had helped change, more than the recognition they had received for their work, Maya treasured the quiet moments they shared. Morning hikes in the mountains, evenings reading together in their living room, conversations that ranged from business strategy to philosophy to dreams for the future they would build together. Alexander had learned that true success wasn't measured in stock prices or profit margins, but in the quality of relationships, the positive impact on other people's lives, and the ability to look in the mirror and respect the person looking back. Maya had learned that love didn't require the sacrifice of individual identity, but rather the courage to be fully yourself with another person and to help them become fully themselves in return. As they drove down the mountain after their wedding ceremony, heading toward a honeymoon in New Zealand that would combine hiking adventures with visits to businesses implementing innovative wellness programs, Maya reflected on how much both of their definitions of strength had evolved. True strength, they had learned, wasn't about carrying everything alone or never showing weakness. True strength was about building a life sustainable enough to last, relationships deep enough to weather any storm, and the wisdom to know when to fight and when to surrender.
What are you thinking about?
Alexander asked as they wound through the curves of the mountain road, his hand resting on her knee. I'm thinking about that first night in the hospital, Maya replied.
When you said you couldn't show weakness, that too many people depended on you. Do you remember?
I remember everything about that night. It was the night you saved my life. No, Maya said softly, it was the night you decided to save your own life. I just happened to be there to help. Alexander smiled, squeezing her hand gently. We saved each other, Maya. And we're going to keep saving each other for the rest of our lives. As they descended toward the city lights below, Maya knew he was right. They had found in each other not just love, but partnership in its truest sense, two people who made each other stronger, braver, and more complete than either could be alone. The CEO had learned that true power came from vulnerability and connection. The nurse had learned that her greatest strength lay not just in healing others, but in allowing herself to be healed in return. Their story was just beginning, but Maya knew it would be a story worth telling, a love that had transformed two broken people into something beautiful, a partnership that would help heal a world full of people who had forgotten that strength and tenderness could coexist, and a marriage built on the radical idea that the best kind of love makes everyone involved more fully human.